It's episode 183 of the Author Stories podcast. I'm your host, Hank Garner. As always, you can find all of the archives of the show at hankgarner.com. And when you're there, please click over in the right-hand sidebar and subscribe to the show. When you subscribe, it boosts us in the algorithms and helps other people find the show. And I would really appreciate it if you did that. Also, over at the website, we have a brand new Facebook group. You can find it at facebook.com/groups/Author Stories Podcast. There's also a link in the show notes. And come join over there. We've got almost 1,000 people in the group already. We're doing some great giveaways, and I'm posting some show specific stuff there, upcoming guests and different things like that, and we're having a lot of fun, so I hope you'll come over and join us. We've got some brand new sponsors this week for the month of May, and I want to thank especially Armand Rosamilia. We're going to highlight several of his books over the month, but I want to start today with his book Dirty Deeds. You may remember that Dirty Deeds was a Kindle Scout winner. It's a crime thriller, the first in a series, and it's available exclusively on Amazon and Kindle Unlimited right now. The gist of the book goes like this. I get paid to erase problems. Did your extramarital affair produce an unwanted complication? Family problems? Just want to enjoy your midlife crisis by yourself? That's where I come in. For a fee, I'll take care of it. A big fee. Only I'm not going to do what you think. I'm going to save you from them. I'm going to save them from you. Pick up Dirty Deeds by Armand Rosamilia. Another great sponsor we're welcoming this week is Tricia Gilliam. Tricia has a new book called Out of the Gray, and it's book 5 in a series, so if you're looking to get into a long series, this is a great one to get started with. When an Earth-based terrorist group targets Hanaria's ambassador, 2 teenagers become entrapped in the conflict. Alex Varon is the son of an Earth Independence Party representative and doesn't want to follow his father's path of political manipulation and corruption. Rika Miller is the adopted daughter of an engineer and nurse who later discovers she's not human, but Hanarian. Alex must decide between his family loyalties and saving the life of an alien he's been taught to fear and hate, while Rika searches for the truth of what happened to her birth parents. Book 5 in the series by Patricia Gilliam. It's called Out of the Gray. There's links to everything in the show notes. Also, my good friend Stefan Boltz in his new book, 6 String. Jennifer Dalton dreamed of being a singer for as long as she could remember. The dream has kept her alive throughout a childhood mired in poverty and a broken and abusive home. When her younger brother dies and her mother takes refuge in alcohol, the emotional toll becomes unbearable. One morning she runs away, taking with her the one thing she owns, her beloved 6-string guitar. This is the story of a girl finding herself alone in the good and the bad, the friends she makes, and a choice that could rob her of everything she's won. That's 6 String by Stefan Boltz. There's links to everything in the show notes. Stay tuned after the show for an audio clip from Richard Gleaves and the Jason Crane series. Thank you for listening.
Hey there, Author Story listeners. This is Kevin Tomlinson from Draft to Digital, and I know that you have a book sitting there just waiting to get out to the world, and you're kind of wondering what the next steps are. So that's why you need to go visit drafttodigital.com/authorstories. That's draft2digital.com/authorstories. And that's where you're going to find all the help you need to go from having a book on your hard drive to having it on someone's Kindle or iPad or other reading device. So go visit drafttodigital.com/authorstories right now.
Well, thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. Today, it is my very great joy to have A.G. Riddle back on the show, or Gary Riddle as he goes by. But someone told me not long ago they paid a great compliment to the show and said that they really loved kind of the vibe of the show and that. And my answer was the reason the show comes across the way it does, I hope, is because I get to talk to people that I'm truly fans of, and then in rare occasion I get to be friends with those people that I'm also a fan of, and I think that comes across in the way I carry on interviews and things like that. And so A.G. Riddle joins me again today, and I said all that to say when I first read your first book, The Atlantis Gene, I was was totally blown away for a number of reasons. One, you kept me guessing all through the book, but you also seem to be a fan of really weird stuff like I am, and and that made me so happy. So anyway, you have a brand new book. It's called Pandemic. I posted on Facebook yesterday that, or the day before, that you were going to come back on the show, and you were gracious enough to send me an early copy of it, and I read it, and I have to say that you have grown as a writer, and I hate to say that because it makes it sound like your early stuff wasn't up to par, and it was absolutely fantastic. But I can tell that that you have taken a journey with this book, and it has taken you to a wonderful new place. So welcome back to the show.
Oh, well, thanks for having me again. I absolutely love to hear that. I mean, I've heard it from so many readers, and it's tough after, Atlantis was my first book. I mean, it took a long time to write, and I did the best I could. I mean, I'm still really proud of that book, but with this one, I wanted to challenge myself, and I wanted to, as you said, grow. I mean, I think if you're going to do something, for me, I want to try to get better at it with every book, but Pandemic was a challenge that I never imagined.
Yeah.
I really bit off more than I could chew, and I just kind of worked through it. But I'm so glad you enjoyed it. For every reader that tells me that, I mean, after I worked on this book for 2.5 years, and just sweating bullets when I release it. But every time I hear a reader say, "God, really enjoyed it," and you delivered, I kind of breathe a sigh of relief.
Well, it's still a brand new release, and it's got just at 100 reviews at the time of this recording, with a 4.9 average. I think it's finding an audience. I don't think that's going to be a problem.
I hope so. Yeah, you work on something that long, and I think, no matter how long you work on something, you put a little bit of yourself into it, and you kind of want it to just. I mean, as writers, we all, to a certain extent, have our own equation for what success looks like.
Sure.
But it's like, on some level, I think the common denominator is we all want our work to be read and for it to find an audience. And I hope Pandemic will. I mean, we'll see, but I'm optimistic.
Yeah, it's a phenomenal book, and I want to kind of dig a little deeper into it in just a minute. But since you're a return guest, I can't really use my standard question that I open each show with, and the question about what's your first memory of being a writer. But I will ask you a little different question. When you mentioned Atlantis a minute ago, that first book, and it kind of became a thing that I'm sure you didn't expect, and it kind of took on a life of its own. At what point did you realize that this book was bigger than you ever imagined?
Well, I think it was probably 2 or 3 months after the release, because I mean, you're right in that it just became kind of a force of nature.
Yeah.
I mean, it just kept finding new readers, and I mean, my wife and I, when it first came out, we were like, okay, this is it. This is the the zenith. This is the high water mark. And it's all downhill from, because you sort of expect a new book to kind of come out, finds its readers, and just kind of tapers off and goes away. And we kept thinking, God, there's got to be nobody else that is interested in this book. But month after month, I mean, it just kept going and going, and it's just been amazing. And I think I can attribute it. I think there's a ton of people that just didn't like that book, and there's a lot of people that really did. I mean, you look at the reviews, and it's out there in black and white. I think that the book was helped a great deal, but having Atlantis in the title, this kind of Hollywood phenomenon where they reuse sort of known entities, and there's kind of something baked into that title, and they do a lot of sequels and remakes, and for me, Atlantis was a way to kind of play on this existing mythology. People think about Atlantis, and it's like this really advanced civilization that collapsed really quickly. And I think on some level, we all kind of fear that we're, Atlantis, or living in this kind of era that this kind of thing could happen. The Atlantis Gene implies this kind of scientific mystery, but with that said, I mean, I think that the book was helped a lot by word of mouth, and I think it was the right book at the right time. So it certainly put a lot of pressure on me. And then I did Departure, and it became a pretty big success. So you want to push the envelope with every release, and that's what I was really hoping to do with Pandemic.
So since the last time you were on the show, you've had some pretty big changes in your personal life. You guys had a baby not too long ago, didn't you?
We did, yeah. I'm not, that's the big change, and it was changed our whole life. I mean, my wife and I moved back to North Carolina. We lived in Florida. I think we lived in Florida.
I think so.
First time, when I met you. Yeah, and so I grew up in North Carolina, and she grew up in North Carolina. We moved back, and she gave birth to our first child in September, and she told me, she's like, I really, really want you to finish, this novel in your draft before she arrives. And I finished my draft, and that was really good, but I had no idea how much editing work was ahead of me. And, getting up, and we had, our daughter had colic, which is, heartburn, and we went through this whole thing. I mean, it was a lot of sleepless nights, for months. I mean, it was a pretty rough period, but I wouldn't trade it for the world. And, I'm proud of the book, and, she's kind of the center of our universe right now. But, we had our first child in September, and we're building a new house in Raleigh, which we've been kind of, with everything I do, for better or worse, tend to really get into the weeds on, and so the house is something I've been really involved in, and, to the, I think, delight and chagrin of the builder and architect and landscape architect and structural engineer. And I mean, like so many people working on this thing at this point. But yeah, it's a lot going on with personal life. And so one of the things that I've had to do in the last year is I've always been sort of more driven by passion than disappointment. I admit that. And so I've had to try to be more disciplined with the editing and, getting this thing out there. It's been a challenge.
How has your daily kind of routine changed? When you introduce a little one, kind of all of your preconceived notions go out the window, and all of your best laid plans. Do you find yourself kind of making more office hours, so to speak, to try to rein that in a little bit?
A bit, yeah. I mean, I've tried to set up office hours, but I've found that, for me at least, it just doesn't work. If she's crying or if Anna's changing her, I just tend to go into the nursery and help, or sometimes I just want to play with her and just, I don't know. I mean, it's a lot more interesting is what's going on my computer screen. So, the thing that I've started doing is, I would suggest this to other writers who have young kids, and you kind of, especially if you're getting up in the middle of the night, I mean, I think you have to just go to the computer and say, what am I up to at this point? Am I really tired? I need to edit, or I need to return fan mail, or do I need to, X, Y, Z? Or if you're feeling really creative, write something new. But the big change that I've made is I've set up an office now outside the house, and I'm starting to go to the office. And this is before I became a writer, I had an office in downtown Raleigh in a startup company, and my wife and I have talked about this, and I don't want to go back into that environment totally, but I'm going to go there, write every day and kind of have some set office hours, and then come back home and kind of try to disconnect, because it's been kind of tough. But that's kind of the big change.
This a lot of authors kind of ply their trade from home, and I work from home between writing and podcasting and web design, some other things that I do, and a lot of times I find myself just working 18 hours a day because I have an office out in our backyard where I podcast from and stuff, but I also have a desk in our dining room. And it's just so easy. I'll walk through and I'll find myself sitting down and I say, well, let me do this for a little bit. And the next thing I know, I'm like, dadgummit, I'm working all the time, and you really, I think not only I think it's bad for your productivity because you're constantly distracted by this and that, and you're not giving your family all of your attention, and you're not giving your writing or whatever else you're doing all of your attention, and you're just kind of scatterbrained all the time. And so I love that you're doing that. That's great.
Well, I think you're all over it. I mean, that is more or less what my wife said to me. She's like, I feel like you're here, but you're, constantly thinking about something else. And she, said, I don't care how much, your relationship with your daughter is going to be whatever you want it to be, but, if you want to spend time with her, I want it to be quality time, and I want you to have some disconnect. I mean, writing for me is a second career and something that I sort of came to as something that I just really loved, and it is hard to disconnect, because if I could, I would write 24 hours a day. And you're right, you walk past the office and you're like, let me see what's going on with this or that, or check in. But I think it's tough.
It's tough.
And there's, if you're in a major city, there's a lot of, I'm doing, the office space I rented is from like an office suites company, so I have like, an office with a door, but they have, co-working where you have space where you go in and you have like either a dedicated desk or like a rotating desk, and the cost is not huge or totally prohibitive, I think, for most authors, and it might be something to give a try for a few months.
Yeah, that's great. I like that idea. That's your Author Stories productivity tip of the week, everybody. When you were on the show last, I think Departure was newly released or had not been long. That was another book that I thought was fantastic, and it was a kind of a departure from the Atlantis Gene. How satisfying was that book for you after having written a trilogy that just, like you said, it just kind of became a force of nature? Was that book was that a good palate cleanser for you to kind of open yourself up to then be able to kind of take the turn that you did for the new book, Pandemic?
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful way to describe it. For me, the success of Atlantis, I think the dark side of that is that with it came a lot of pressure and expectations. And so I'd gone through that, and there was, for me, a lot of pressure to release those books quickly, because as a reader, I want, the author, if, you start this great trilogy, I kind of lose interest after, I don't know how long, but I want the books to come out pretty quickly. So I felt a real urgency to get those books out there and to complete that story for readers. And so for me, as like a palate cleanser, I wanted to do something where it was kind of one and done, where I could tell this story that was very different than what I'd done, to challenge myself creatively, something a little more character-driven, and at the same time had a plot that I was kind of fascinated by. And it was tough because my wife and I, we were moving from Florida to North Carolina, and we decided to go to Europe for like 4 months. And so I was writing Departure while I was on the road. And I mean, we would move from hotel to hotel like every 5 or 6 days. And it was just, I was writing in trains and airplanes. We visited 19 countries. It was crazy. But it was a novel that, I had to do some research, but it was nothing like Atlantis or Pandemic. And it was the right novel for me to write. And I think it's good. I mean, I think as writers, you, to a certain extent, have to mix it up just to keep yourself on your toes and to keep yourself kind of interested and energized about it. Because I think as writers, what we love, and I hear this from so many writers, is this shiny new thing. I mean, you're writing this novel and you get fascinated by this idea for another novel. You find yourself writing, 12,000 words in a day, and you've written 200 on your current manuscript. So, that's kind of what Departure. When I actually wrote Departure, I had already been working on Pandemic and The Looking Glass, which was the working title at that point, and I'd been working on it for really a while. But this idea for Departure, I could not get out of my head, and I was like, all right, this is what I'm going to write. So it was a lot of fun.
And Departure's a standalone book. Atlantis was a trilogy, and now Pandemic is the beginning of a new trilogy. When you set out to write Departure, did you know it was going to be standalone? Yeah,
I did. Yeah,
gotcha. Is your approach different on that standalone book than it was on the two trilogies? Do you approach the story differently? Do you approach the setup differently, or is it just a shorter version of the other thing?
No, for me the process is totally different. I mean, for a trilogy, and maybe it's my OCD or nervousness, but I for a trilogy I really want to know where it's going. I want to know what I want to know how that third book ends, not only how the first one ends, because I want to know that payoff and that big surprise and this kind of this build up in the first two books are worth it. And so it takes a ton of planning. I mean, as you saw in Pandemic, the novel took a lot of planning. And I think a standalone is a little more fun. You can start with this kind of kernel, and you can start with this, this long arc of where this novel's going, and then you can just kind of see what happens. And if something happens, that's cool, but it doesn't upset book 2 or book 3, and it's kind of that's all right. But I think for me, at least, standalones are a lot easier and more fun to write than trilogies. But I think that trilogies, as an author, I'm perhaps more proud of, and I think that readers prefer a trilogy and something with a longer arc.
Yeah, I think there's something about getting invested in the characters and in the world a little bit, but kind of going on this journey with these people that you've come to love and that you've dropped a lot of sweat over in reading, like you do in Pandemic. It's just nice to know that you get to carry that story on. But then I've also read trilogies that should have been a standalone novel. And when you get toward the end of that, you are worn out, and not in a good way. You're just tired of these people because that the author didn't do his or her job. Actually, when I was reading Pandemic, I guess I knew it was the beginning of a trilogy, but it just didn't really sink into me. I was just kind of expecting this to be a one-and-done story. And at the end, I was satisfied. And then I read your author's note at the end, and I was like, oh, yeah, there's more to this story coming. And I think that's brilliant, when you can end a book one and say, oh, that was a great story. And then you get excited that there's more to come. So there's a real skill to wrapping up a satisfying first part of a trilogy and keep the story going at the same time. That's how hard did you sweat over sticking the landing on book one while keeping the story open?
Well, a lot. The Atlantis Gene was a pretty big cliffhanger, and I took some grief for it, and a lot of readers loved it. And that book came out in March of 2013. 4 years ago, and I think the market has changed. I mean, I think readers really want a complete story now. I mean, they love. It's sort of like a TV series. A season needs to tell a story, and that story needs to end. And it's okay if you hint towards what the next season is about, or dangle this kind of looming conflict or threat that's going to be addressed in the next season. I think they want, the premise or the conflict was started in the first season to be concluded, and to see these characters, grow to some extent and overcome whatever challenges them. So the big thing that I struggled with Pandemic was the length of the novel. It's like, this is this. And so, I wrote it, and it was kind of, when I first wrote it, it was pushing 200,000 words, and I was just like, this is too much. And so I, chopped some stuff out, and then I sent it to my alpha readers, and this is 5 of these people, and they're former editors who are now just pleasure readers, and they give me feedback and a lot of good advice. And they were really split. 4 of them were like, this is amazing. I think you've done something that's kind of new and interesting. And because Pandemic, deep dives into the character's background. We get to really see these people and understand where they came from and the reasons for why they're doing what they're doing. And they were like, it's not a problem that the novel's really long because it's well-paced and because it's engaging. We think it's okay. And then one of the editors, the alpha readers, was like, you got to chop this into 2 books. This thing is way too long, and you're going to lose a lot of readers when you do this much backstory. And so that's something that I really struggled with, was the length of Pandemic, because, it's the longest book I've written, and I looked at my own library. Like, I went to the bookshelf and looked at Tom Clancy books and Robert Ludlum, and I was like, man, they write long books. Maybe I'm okay. And perseverated. And so the biggest thing I really felt at the end of Pandemic as a reader, when I look at it, I'm like, man, this is really, we tie off a lot of plot lines. We kind of hint at what this larger story arc is, and I think it's satisfying, and I think it's really tough because when you're in a changing market, I believe we're in a changing market where with every quarter or every 6 months, reader tastes and habits are evolving. It's like, what's the right length for a novel, and how much closure is enough, and how much is not enough, and what do readers want? And so that was a big struggle, but I ultimately decided not to split the novel in 2 and not to cut out a lot of stuff, and just kind of went with my gut.
Well, I noticed you posted online something about this being your longest book, or something. Maybe I forget where I saw it. Anyway, I didn't get that feeling when I read it, and after that, I went and looked on Amazon, and the thing's like 700 pages long. But your chapters are short, and it's extremely well paced. And I like the way that you change character viewpoint quite a bit, because you've got a couple of different storylines going there, and the kind of keeping those threads going and some action in each one. It was a page turner for me. So I'm glad you didn't take the advice of some people and whittle it down, because it was. I really enjoyed the way that you set it up. So that's great. You talk about kind of the industry changing and stuff. You've sold. I think I saw that you've sold over 2 million copies of the Atlantis trilogy, and you still self-published Pandemic. Was there? I'm sure you've been courted by publishers and things to try to kind of take advantage of the audience that you've built.
Yeah, definitely. There's a few things that you don't realize. I self-published Departure, and then 20th Century Fox bought the movie rights, and HarperCollins, I guess they're the same corporate family, News Corp, bought the publishing rights to Departure, and released it on hardcover and bookstores. Had me up to Comic-Con in New York, and some really cool stuff around that. And it's a road that I'm glad I went down, and I think there's some really wonderful people working there. But at the end of the day, I really feel like self-publishing is for me. When they released the ebook, re-released the book, and the print book was in bookstores. The ebook was $9.99, which I think, I paid $9.99 for ebooks, but I'm not sure that's really the price that I think is.
It's not the magic price point for sure.
Fair or appropriate. Yeah. So that was a little tough for me, and they recently reduced it to $4.99, which I really appreciate. I think is great. But the other thing is, in my first life, as a startup, I was kind of used to really innovating fast, and for lack of a better word, kind of being in charge and being able to make a decision, go try something. Right. Make a decision for better or worse. And sometimes it's a wrong call, but you make the wrong call, you go out there, you figure it out, and you try something else. And I think that if you get too many cooks in the kitchen, things get a lot tougher. If you are in a changing market, I think that agility is something that's really important. So for me, coming up the way I did, and being really comfortable with marketing something online, and creating something and putting it on the internet, and trying to get people to use it or like it, is something that I'm really comfortable with. I think, if I was from a different era, or, was more enamored with the idea of seeing my book in a bookstore, it's probably different for me. But I think that self-publishing is definitely the best sort of fit for me. And I don't put it out there as a panacea or a blanket solution for everybody. But I was really happy with it, and releasing Pandemic, it was something I didn't even think about. I was like, this is something I'm going to self-publish.
And there has to be a certain point where, when you've built your audience, you reach a certain critical mass. And I would think that the publisher, although they can open certain doors for you that would be difficult for a self-publisher to do, ultimately what you're trying to do is reach readers. And once you've built that audience, I would think that it becomes much easier to sell your next book to the people that already love you.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, for me, breaking out in print as a new author is kind of a challenge. I'm in Barnes & Noble, and no one's ever heard of me. And at the same time, on Amazon, I do have a lot of readers, and people are familiar with it. They've read the work. And I really, one of the big factors for me, at least, is that I'm a new author, largely an unknown. And some of the Amazon programs, like Kindle Unlimited, and having, Prime reading and the ability to borrow the book, I think that really makes it low risk for readers. And for new authors out there, I think that you got to kind of stack all this stuff up, and you got to tune out a lot of the noise of what people are saying, and say, what is really important to me, and how do I build an audience? Well, if you go out there with a print book, a hardcover in a bookstore, or a mass market paperback, you're competing against John Grisham and Lee Child and everyone else, and there's not a ton of advantage. And I think you've got to make it really low risk for readers to try your work and really fall in love with you. It's either that, or you build your audience through a number of years. It might be 10 or 20 years, or who knows how long it will be. But I think Kindle Unlimited, allows people to try your work basically for free. I mean, it's kind of baked in for them for the monthly subscription. And all you're doing is competing on the strength of your content at that point, and how appealing it is to readers. And the same with Prime Reading and so those have been I think a key to my success, and it's something I'm keen to stick pretty close to. So when I self-published Pandemic, I did it exclusive on Amazon.
So let's talk about Pandemic just a little bit. I read the book, and I think I texted you, and I said something like, Gary, I cussed you during this book. If you're getting some bad vibes from down south, that was me. This book, I think I checked my temperature a couple of times while I was reading this book, because I was like, oh God, I'm coming down with something. This is just too much.
It'll make you paranoid.
It will make you paranoid. And I think this is what really separated it for me from Atlantis. And even though you really built a plausible story in the Atlantis trilogy, and but then it went somewhere that's a little fantastical. I think you would agree with that. And
certainly,
yeah, and I love that about it. That's don't get me wrong, but Pandemic felt like this story could come right off of CNN tomorrow, and frankly, that scared the crap out of me. So first off, where did the idea for this come from?
Well, I love that question. I mean, so one of the things I wanted to do with this new trilogy was I wanted to explore, really the techno-thriller genre and do something in the realm of really hard science and realism, and I wanted to do favorite TV shows growing up, and I loved these episodes where they had it where it was just super real. I mean, I love the alien abduction concepts and all that, but I did love the hard science episodes. So I love conspiracy stories. So for me, the origins of this story was, what if there were this group of scientists believed that the human race had kind of gone too far and was in danger and was it also at risk of so many things, variation in solar output or solar events or asteroids or, hostile extraterrestrials or climate change or, nuclear war. And they, decided that the world had kind of been run by these politicians and these business people, and they said, no more. We're going to create this device. We're going to create some technology that will save the race and will make us safe from all these threats. And these scientists, in a real sense, wanted to be in charge. And so I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. What would that look like? What would that be? And so, the working title was The Looking Glass, and it was about these scientists that were creating this thing that would save humanity and would protect us. And so I kind of, I wrote really the backstory and the history of the conspiracy group first, and then, what grew out of that is going to be the trilogy, and Pandemic is the first book, and, Pandemic is kind of how their, master plan for humanity starts. And I was really, when I wrote it, I was like, the Atlantis Gene is about the sort of the before of a pandemic. It's kind of the epilogue to this global pandemic. And then the Atlantis Plague is kind of the epilogue. I mean, it's the aftermath of this pandemic happened, and they're trying to sort it out. And then Departure, spoiler alert, is about these people that travel to this world, this, hundreds of years without humanity. So it's like there's always a pandemic in my books. And I suppose the conclusion is that I'm really fascinated by it. But this is the first book where I went inside CDC and the WHO and what would happen during a pandemic. None of the other books really deal with that. And what would it like for the epidemiologist and the people on the front line who discover that, wow, we've got a real pandemic that's about to circle the globe and is breaking out, that's erupting everywhere. And then what would life in America look like if we really had this pandemic that was unstoppable? And it took a lot of research, and that's what we wanted to explore, is the realism of that scenario. And I think there are some movies that have done it, like Contagion. Earlier Outbreak was sort of about chase to isolate a pathogen, but what I wanted to do in Pandemic was to story of what these every day to stopping new pathogens and novel bacteria and viruses, but to tie it together with this conspiracy and this kind of grandiose plan and the story of, there's these people that have this plan for the race, and this is just the first act in what they're doing. So that to me was kind of something new that I thought would be interesting, and I thought, readers that had enjoyed my previous work would like it. It was something I was intellectually kind of really interested in, so that got me started.
How did you go about doing research for this? Because you do really get in the weeds with, like you said, the CDC and the WHO and kind of what policy would look like, but also what kind of the boots on the ground, what their lives are like, and the battle that they're facing. And how do you get into that level of detail? How do you begin the research process?
Well, for me, one of the biggest strategies for me has been to go to either popular news sites or magazines and see what articles they're publishing and how interesting they are to readers. I mean, there's all these signals on it. You can see how many times it's been shared on Facebook or how many comments. I get a sense of what, I sort of use my gut and I say, what am I interested in? And what is the aspect of this that's kind of appealing? And then you see what other readers are kind of into. And there you kind of winnow it down and then you get into the weeds. And so, I can't even count the hours on the CDC website, reading their press releases and white papers. And then I learned a lot from, I read some books. The problem with these books with regard to pandemics and EIS, which is the CDC's group for investigating new pathogens, they're inevitably dated. The field is changing a good bit, and the practices kind of adapt as we develop new relationships. Our relationship in Kenya, where the outbreak starts, has certainly evolved. And so a lot of that was news articles, but also watching videos. Videos were the most helpful because now the cool thing is that, a lot of the new information that you're going to find is from conferences and talks that people give on scientific papers or, just to the industry, the market. And so I got to really, I spent just countless hours watching these videos of CDC employees and Commission Corps officers kind of talking about what it is like and what it's like to work at the CDC. And then I was very lucky. I had a couple of beta readers who work at the CDC who work in the field, and they read the book and made some great suggestions. Suggestions about what is the actual security of walking in a CDC building, which is something you won't find online. It's not talked about. And they were like, here's a detail you could tweak that, is a little more realistic and kind of interesting. But the research process was intense.
And those little details are what really suck the reader in, that make you, it's the little mundane things. Sometimes it's not the big flashy details. It's the little things like the day-to-day grind of going to work and having to go through a security checkpoint and the relationships you build with those people around there that make you feel like you're part of the story.
Yeah.
I don't want to give away too much of the book because it's brand new and people are still reading it and all of that. And I want everybody to go out and get a copy of Pandemic because it will keep you up at night. And it has my Author Stories endorsement on it for sure. But what is it about conspiracy theories do you think that we love so much that, we as readers and a bunch of us as writers that love a good conspiracy, and we love people, working in the background against the betterment of humanity and society. But there's something about it that just fascinates us. What do you think that is about us?
Well, I agree that there is something about it, and I think it's this innate kind of sense that there are forces more powerful than us that we can't see, and and I think that means different things to everyone. But I also think it's in some sense a paranoia about the human condition and about humanity as a whole, and the people who get power or have power over us. We aren't convinced that they're totally moral creatures and that have our best interest in mind. So it's this kind of, I think that it's this innate fear that the people that can do us harm might do us harm if it could advance themselves or make themselves more secure. But I also think that it's the mystery of it. I think as a species, we're drawn to mystery. We're kind of genetically programmed to wonder about things and want to know, how does this work? Or what if I created this? Or why is this way? And if you can't explain why something is the way it is, then you start to think, well, that's a conspiracy. And I wonder, and then we get carried away into something. I think it's our innate curiosity.
Yeah, and there's something about, I've heard horror writers talk about, and I think Stephen King famously talks about it in his book on writing, that telling scary stories kind of allows us to deal with that thing inside of us, so that we don't do these crazy things, or maybe it helps us to, confront the monster under the bed, and maybe conspiracy stories and the stories about the shadowy things that go on behind the scenes. Maybe telling these stories and reading them allows us to confront some of those fears as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's sort of this idea that you're not alone, that if you think the world is really weird, and I think a lot of us do think the world's really weird these days, that you're in good company. And I think Stephen King is right. There's a little bit of emotional catharsis of being scared, or, having this outlet of, God, that was really scary or weird, and then you go back to your normal life, and it seems more normal and you're more comfortable with it. And I think that's, for me, pandemic is a little like that. You think about, God, what could be, and this, this would be terrible, and the world looks maybe a little more manageable.
Yeah. One thing that really jumped out at me about Pandemic is I felt like the story really started with the characters. And even though this is a big story, and I know that you had a firm grasp on the plot from the beginning, you can tell that from the book. But I really felt like the characters were very well represented and were very alive. Can you talk just a little bit about your process for building these characters in this story?
Well, it was tough. I mean, I wrote these very broad character backstories, and a lot of the problem with Pandemic and the challenge for me was all the timelines. And I think as creative professionals, we're all a little bit, out in space, or we're all kind of like, let's let it flow and, tell the story. But, for a novel like Pandemic, I mean, it's like, well, as you saw in the novel, I mean, it unfolds. It's like, day 1, day 2, day 3, and things have to happen. And then, we have this plot line in Atlanta, and we have one in Kenya and one in Berlin, that there's a very real time difference, and things are happening synchronously. And so that was a challenge. But also when I did the backstory, it's like, Desmond, was born on X date, and then when the fires occurred in Australia, he's 5 years old, and when he goes to Oklahoma, he's 6 years old, and X, Y, Z. And so I had this thing, and same thing for Peyton. She's born in London, and then she comes to America when she's 9 years old, and it was really tough to keep up with the ages of everyone and what happened here and there, and it really to be a lot more focused than I was in any other book. But and I write longhand in a notebook when I'm writing out my character bios, and so I really spent months and months just writing out these character bios to try to. I mean, I started with this scientific group, and I was like, this is the core conspiracy, and the long arc of what's going to happen. And so then I got to who's involved. I mean, who are the people that are in the conspiracy? And, what we learned in Pandemic is the people that found this group, the Order of Sidium, they are the parents of our main characters. And so then the question becomes, when were these main characters born, and what is their journey, and what happens to them along the way? And so it was really in terms of, for me, the timelines, because David Gatewood was my editor, who did a fantastic job and was really good at picking these things out to say, you're off by a few months here, and this old, he's here, and those edits bring you no joy or pleasure, but you've got to do it, I think, for the sake.
Damn it, Gatewood! Yeah,
that was good. Yeah, and you just let it go. You did not let it go. You never let it go, and I fixed all the references, I think.
The long trip himself. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Lonetrout.com.
Right. Oh, God love him. Gary, thank you for coming back on the show. The new book is called Pandemic. I see that the school genome is already up for pre-order. Is that going to be out this fall?
Yeah,
okay.
It'll be out.
All right. Have you finished that book yet?
I am about 60% done. I think. I mean, we'll see.
We'll see what Gatewood says about it.
I got a good start. That's right. We'll see how messed up these timelines are when he gets into it. But,
and can we expect the third of the trilogy next year?
I hope so. I mean, I have the outline for the third book, and I'm hoping that it will. Hoping it will come out in the spring, but we'll see.
Well, I put links to everything down in the show notes. Everybody run and get a copy of Pandemic, and then make sure your vaccinations are up to date. Gary, thank you so much for coming back on the show.
Get that travel med kit and immunizations, even if you're staying at home, and a flu shot.
That's right. Gary, thanks for coming on the show, and I wish you the best of luck with the new book. Now stay tuned for an audiobook excerpt from Richard Gleaves. Pick up the entire Jason Crane series. Link in the show notes.
They sat in silence, leaning on Spook Rock. It pulsed against his back, in rhythm with his heart. He fought an urge to press his palms to it and steal its mysteries. Kate took her hand away. This fundraiser for my father's campaign, was it your idea? No, I didn't think so. You need to watch out. For what? She stood and paced, hands in pockets, avoiding his eyes. Right now, you're a free agent. Nobody knows what you can do except me and Joey. That's rare. You've got space to find your own path, without everybody watching you or controlling you. How many of them, us, are there? A few handfuls of families. We used to be all over, but we're kind of dying out. The secrecy issue makes it hard for us to find each other, hard to find people to marry and the like. So we congregate in a few obvious places. Salem, Sleepy Hollow. Transylvania? Don't be stupid. There's no monsters, just people. And ghosts. Ghosts are people. They were. She held her arms out. That's all there is. People in the spirit world. And places in between. Magic places, haunted places. Like this. We gravitate to towns where we can stick together. It sounds nice. It can be smothering. We have factions. Not all of us want to get by in peace. Some of us, my father is one, say we need to be more aggressive. Increase our numbers. Take charge of things. Politics, finance. Fix the world. People listen. They think they're special. They don't call themselves the gifted. They call themselves the appointed. As if God singled them out to rule. My dad's a good man. He just thinks he knows what's best for everybody. And you'll be meeting his crowd. At the fundraiser. It will be mixed, mostly normals, but I'll point out the dangerous ones. My father employs a man named Mather. You can't miss him. He has purple eyes. Mather is like this rock. He'll be able to sense you. If you want to stay a free agent, you'll need to avoid him. Or else what? They'll want to recruit me? You're Ichabod's descendant. Ichabod was attacked and survived, a potential founder. They're already watching you. I'm no good to anyone. You don't believe that. Neither do I. She knelt and pushed the hair out of his eyes. What am I going to do with you, Jason Crane? Love me, he thought. He felt himself lean forward. They would kiss, here in this sacred place, beneath the stars. Stars? Stars? What time is it? Jason jumped to his feet. We need to go. Why? A firefly swept the air, flared yellow-green, and died. What's wrong? She followed his gaze and gasped. Fireflies swam in every dark crevasse. Faces coalesced where the lights hovered. faces of crones and young boys and stern men. Emaciated, hale, wounded, vacant, menacing, piteous. Bodies took form. Military uniforms, bonnets, black lace, crepe, shrouds, winding sheets. Sleepy Hollow Cemetery had disgorged its dead, and that grand army of spirits now made camp at Spook Rock to await orders from their leader. A laugh chopped the wood of the forest. Jason had heard that laugh before. He squeezed Kate's hand. Run.
You've been listening to the Author Stories podcast with Hank Garner. You can find all of the archives of the show over at hankgarner.com. When you're there, please subscribe to the show and leave a comment over on iTunes or